Welcome to the Popcorn for Dinner podcast. It's been 2.5 months since we started this journey, leading you and holding your hands, talking all things Westeros, Fire and Blood, House of the Dragon, and we are finally at the end of season one. It has been a wild ride, a lot of mixed emotions. Some people liked it, some people don't, obviously. I think most people liked it more than didn't like it. But we're finally at the end of the season, and we get to sit back and do a retrospective and also discuss what happened this episode because a lot happened. And yeah, shit's about to get real. I love the fact that they ended on a cliffhanger, but I know that everyone is like itching to know what happens next. But unfortunately, we have to wait a year um, to get all that good tea. But before we get started and talk about everything that happened this episode and take a retrospective on the season, we do have some admin stuff that we'd like to talk about. There is an article that's being published on Industry today. Bankole wrote that article, and I saw a little bit of a sneak peek of it. I haven't watched Industry yet, but I was like, damn, okay.
I
So
have the article's fire.
yeah, so
I've watched
please,
Industry, so take it
I,
from me.
I should watch Industry. Honestly, I've just been spoiled. I'm basically spoiled it for myself at this point, but I'm still gonna want to watch it. But yeah, please read that article. The link will be in the description for anyone who wants to read it. Please read it and share it. Also, we will be discussing the second season of The White Lotus starting from next week. I don't know what day that airs, but I should know that. But please tune back in for another show. House of Dragons ending, where there's a lot of more stuff that we get to talk about on the podcast. So please tune back in to hear discussion of the White Lotus, and also the Rings of Power is out. The final episode of the Ring of Power is out. So popcorn for dinner can stop being fantasy for dinner, and we can embrace other mediums and art forms as we discuss.
Are there other mediums and art forms?
Hey, at some
Do they even
Succession,
exist?
we did Succession, and we did Better Call Saul. That's not fantasy, We just go through
Yeah, the trailer for
experiences.
Succession season 4 is out.
Oh
It
yeah,
says spring 2023.
yeah,
So
I know. It's global warming needs to act faster so spring can come.
wow.
But yeah, as always, we are your co-hosts, Ebube and Afam, and we'll be discussing House of the Dragon season one, episode 10, titled "The Black Queen," directed by I don't know who directed this episode actually. Do you know?
Greg Yatanis, the same person who directed episodes 2 and 3, I
Two and
believe.
three. Okay. Who directed episode one?
Miguel.
Miguel. Okay, okay.
Yeah, 2 and 3. 2 as in um that's the one. I forget what the title of episode 2 is. But that's the one where they kind of set things up and they explore marrying Viserys marrying other people, and then
Yeah,
3
yeah,
is second of his name,
yeah,
which is the one where the hunt happens, I believe.
yeah, yeah. Okay,
I think so.
yeah,
Yeah, it was either 2 and 3 he directed, or 3 and 4.
okay. Yeah. So let's get started at talking about this episode. First of all, the initial thoughts. How do you feel about the episode?
Well, I may never wear green again. uh, I I am in mourning for the loss of my good brother, and we knew this was coming. In our little tinfoil hat calculations, we figured out that this is probably how they'd end the season. Well, it didn't make it any easier because, my goodness, seeing that stuff on the screen is very different from imagining it in your head.
Yeah,
But I guess, I mean, of course, we'll reach some more details about that. But I think overall the episode was nice. 9 and 10, I kind of figured that they would be sort of sibling episodes in a sense, because you have Viserys' death happening at the end of 8, and really all that's left is the aftermath and how people are going to react and how those reactions might lead to further conflict. So episode 9, the Green Council, I mean, once I saw the titles, the Green Council and the Black Queen, I knew that we'd be looking at Alicent's perspective and Rhaenyra's perspective, because as episode 6 title says, this is a story about the princess and the queen at its core. And I think it delivered, really. Episode 9 was kind of a slow burn type of thing where it didn't feel like much was happening, but a lot was brewing under this under the boards and and behind the scenes. So I think it was cool to see all that dialogue come to life in episode 9, and I mentioned that last week. But I think it's the same thing here. There's a little bit more action. there's a lot more fire and blood in terms of the way people are talking. There's a lot more passion because these guys aren't the quote unquote offenders in the situation. They are the ones reacting and trying to defend. And I mean, their defense was so sort of targeted that when Otto had the guts to show his face, I was like, is this guy going to make it out of here? Like, is yeah, they definitely gave him an interesting welcome. But yeah, lots of interesting dragon usage in the episode. Lots of interesting dragon themes. Lots of themes of family. Lots of personal conflicts. Lots of self blame. I think lots of stuff was explored in in one episode that normally they may take like two or three to do. And I've heard a few people say that the episode was kind of a bit boring just because some of the really, I guess, shocking stuff happens more towards the end. But I think that's fine. I mean, some of the best episodes of this series and even of Game of Thrones have that kind of vibe where they spend time doing significant build up in order to pay off satisfactorily in a way that also sets up new stuff. I mentioned before that one of my favorite Game of Thrones episodes is season 4, episode 6, The Laws of Gods and Men. And um, that episode kind of does a lot of, there's a lot of dialogue, there's trials, there's people doing this, doing that, and then there's Tyrion's speech at the end, which is maybe like 1 minute, 2 minutes, and it's just like the most memorable thing from there. And then that sets up what happens in episode 8, which is also a slow burn. Episode 8 is The Mountain and the Viper, where Oberyn is Tyrion's champion. And that episode ends with an 8 minute sequence where Oberyn and the Mountain fight, and we know how that ends. Like literally, it's a slow burn, and then right at the end, those final 8 minutes, that's where the action is, and that was very effective. And I think it's the same thing here. So, I definitely like the episode.
Yeah, I thought it was better than the last episode, and not just because of like
Yeah, I
the
can agree with that.
not just because of the fact that the characters I love are back on the screen, but
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like season episode nine
We'll
was a
ignore your
slow
agenda.
burn. Episode 9 was a slow burn, building up towards Rhaenys' scene escaping the dragon pit on Melee's. But I felt like
Escaping? You mean failing to, as some people would say?
I mean, we hear her reasoning a bit more this episode. It's like she's part of this conflict and she knows that there's a war going to be, but she doesn't want to go down in history as the one who
It's not
started the
her war to
war.
start.
It's not
Like
her war to start.
that's a very fair thing that she
Yeah,
says.
it is. But I felt like the build up towards the conclusion of this episode. I mean, the builds up were similar. I obviously prefer this build up because the characters I love are here. But I felt like the payoff, like her just escaping like that, just it didn't happen that way in the books, but it just felt a bit like I don't know, like why, and when I saw the episode, but the build up, the payoff on this episode, I felt was a lot more like intense and like it felt a bit more rewarding. But at the same time, this payoff won't have happened if like the what happened in episode 9 didn't happen. So it's one of these things where I understand why things were done the way to give us this payoff at the end of episode 10, but it was just to me the stronger out of the two episodes. And like you were right, they are sibling episodes. George does stuff like this all the time. In the original the book series, book 4 and 5 are written like kind of parallel, because the story gets so big, he splits it up so that book 4 is what's happening in King's Landing and Dorne, and book 5 is what's happening in Marine and the North. But they kind of happen at the same time. And that's beautifully well done. But yeah, Rhaenyra obviously had like a stand-up episode. This episode, she I keep there was a lot of foreshadowing as to Luke's death because she did spend a lot of time talking with Lucerys this episode, and her sweet little boy, and you see he's like he's concerned that he's not going to be a good ruler, and that's like all of those insecurities are being shown clearly, and like
So
Rhaenyra
much
is such a
camera
good
focus
mom.
on his face.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And Rhaenyra is such a good mom compared to Alicent, at least. I mean, her son thinks she's perfect, and obviously we know Rhaenyra is not a perfect person. She's made some decisions where we're like, what are you doing? But
Whereas
like at this,
Alicent's kids know for a fact she's crazy. Like she's not crazy, but I feel like they think she's crazy because
yeah,
they feel like she's kind of unhinged, but then she feels like they're also unhinged and she's like, I don't
yeah,
like any of you. That's the thing. Like
yeah,
Rhaenyra's family, they love each other, but it's not strained. Like they actually also like each other. There's a
yeah,
difference. In
yeah,
Alicent's family, that love is kind of just there. Like biological reactions and such, but
Yeah,
in reality, they're like, oh my god, I don't want to be around any of these people.
yeah. I think that out of the three siblings like that we've been introduced to, out of Allison's kids, I can't think of any one of them who seem to have a good relationship. You know, Aegon and Helena is like no. Aemon and Aegon is no. We don't know that much about Helena and Aemon, but like at the same time, the fact that we don't know anything is telling because we know about Jason and Luce, we know about Joffrey's still a baby, but we know, you know, and yeah, that's just unfortunate. But yeah, I think Rhaenyra is a good mother, and she's raised
Hmm.
good kids. If only Viserys had married Rhaenyra to Daemon all the way back then, maybe these children would have, you know, had to. They would have first of all grown up with Daemon as a dad, which is badass. But also maybe they wouldn't have had to deal with all the scorn that they've had to deal with all their lives. But at the same time, we wouldn't have had the twins, and I love the twins. They're pretty chill. They're like I don't know the Serena and Venus of the even though they're not twins of Westeros.
Yeah, true, true. That is very true.
Yeah, one of my I was talking to one of my friends about about the show, and they've been listening to the podcast, and they were like, "Is do you think Damon is bipolar?" I'm not like I can't diagnose anyone, but like homeboy goes through like what seems like mood swings, and not mood swings, but like hot and cold in a lot of ways. It might not be intense as some other characters I've seen on screen, like
Uh-huh.
shameless, like their mom Monica, but like maybe Damon is bipolar, man, because a lot of his descriptions, view him as sometimes being the best hero and sometimes being the best villain at the same time, and that conflict is just I love the character. He's a very good character. He's a hero sometimes. He's a villain sometimes, and yeah, I think that Matt Smith is doing a very very good job of bringing Damon to life.
Yeah, bipolar. That's an interesting thing. I feel a lot of people watching the show have been getting mad at the writers because I think that's just what people love to do these days: get mad at writers.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I'm gonna use one of my one of my we'll get to that cards for this actually because I have some things to say about people getting mad about writers. But people were saying stuff like Damon is doing this, then Damon is doing that. Like these writers clearly have different understandings of who this character is supposed to be, and the contradictions show up in the script. Now that's an
Mm,
interesting way to look at it, I suppose, because maybe there is some truth to that. I think it's that Damon is more of a complicated person. I think maybe these guys are on the same page about who Damon is. Sure, they might have slightly different understandings, but I think they're on the same page as to what needs to be shown to the audience.
yeah.
Um, as far as being bipolar, I mean, yeah, like bipolar disorder comes in like different forms.
Yeah.
Um, Typically there will be like manic episodes, which I guess one might say some of the things Damon does could be qualified as manic episodes, but I'm not sure. But typically it's like there's huge mania, and then there is huge like depressive, I guess depressive periods, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of takes a break from reality sometimes as well. So there would be like some form of absence of mind, like psychosis or whatever. So
Mm,
I don't know if we can go as far as to say David is bipolar, but
yeah.
he does seem to have kind of mood swings because I think it's less medical and more in terms of he doesn't really know what he wants.
Yeah.
I think he has an idea of what he wants, but he's not sure what he should want because in this episode, people were talking about how, or I guess kind of the audience reaction I've been seeing is kind of like people want to believe that he's dredging up his old feelings of wanting to take control and wanting to be the heir. When he's at that council and everybody can literally hear Rhaenyra screaming for dear life as she's trying to give birth. Um, it's like okay, he's here trying to call shots when she's explicitly said nobody should be calling shots
yeah.
until she's there, and then like Jaceres shows up and he's like, yeah, don't do anything. Um, some you I saw that as Damon trying to make sure that they were prepared. I think
Yeah.
a lot of other people saw that as Damon trying to take power for himself and be in
Yeah.
control while Rhaenyra isn't there, or maybe like rule through her.
Yeah.
But I don't really think that's the case. I'm not sure that even benefits him at this point, because I think there's real love and equity in their relationship, um, at least most of the time, or at least for pretty much most of what we see. So he crowns her queen. He wants to be there for her. I think it's a bit unfair to see him trying to protect his family as him necessarily trying to seize power. Like, sure, it's it's a possibility. I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but when I was watching that, I saw that more like the looks on his face and stuff. I thought that was kind of more of him trying to push things to the side mentally, because the last time he was in a situation where his wife was pregnant, it didn't go well,
Yeah,
right? So he was kind of hoping for the best and trying to make sure that things were done that she would want done. But
yeah,
it took Jaceres kind of appearing to remind him that, like, Rhaenyra wants measured responses, not fully aggressive ones.
yeah. I,
So
I
yeah, let's
I
see how that
agree with
goes.
you on that because all the times when Rhaenyra was like when Rhaenyra reeled him in, he always came like reeled in. Like when Jashavis said, "Chill, don't do anything to Rhaenyra's back," he didn't. When he was willing to kill Otto Hightower, he wa- and Rhaenyra said stop, he stopped immediately and he listens to her and I mean he's crowned two people king. He gave his brother his crown symbolically at the end of episode 8 or whenever, and he crowned Rhaenyra in this episode.
Hmm.
I feel like his ambitions to rule the realms have changed, but he understands what Otto Hightower is. I mean, the second he heard that Viserys was dead, he immediately assumed that they killed him. And he knows that Otto has no other play than to try and kill them, which is what Otto wants. And so he understands that these people are not trying to have a peaceful resolution. You don't usurp a throne if you want, like, peace. When you usurp a throne, you know war is coming. And Daemon is like a wartime prince. He fought in the Stepstones. Well, that's the only war he's been in, to be honest. But he's bred for conflict, and he has a dragon who's also has a very fiery personality. And yeah, he's trying to protect his family, in my view. I mean, I would rather, like, you can make the argument that yeah, he is making moves while Rhaenyra is in his on like giving birth, and I want to talk about that actually after this.
Hmm.
But it's like if they do, even if Rhaenyra dies, like that doesn't mean her claim dies with her because Jace will be heir to the throne, and I feel like if Rhaenyra would died giving birth, she would die knowing that Daemon isn't just gonna like abandon everyone else, abandon her remaining children. He's gonna fight for them, and I think that's just who the character is. I think that him and Rhaenyra in a lot of ways are soulmates, and they obviously are going to have disagreements. Daemon is ready to go to war, and there's a theme of this whole show about all the men just want to go to war. They just want to go fight, and all the women are the one
Yeah,
exercising
like I
restraint.
said last week, the men in this world don't think far.
Yeah, it's just all right. This happened. Let's go kill each other, and that was which is why when Otto came to give the message to Rhaenyra, like I can tell that Alicent gave her the page of that. So that book that Otto gave Rhaenyra was a book that was shown in episode 1 or 2 when they were kids and they were reading a book that they liked together. So that was kind of like an olive branch from Alicent being like, this doesn't have to go to war. Even though I'm stealing your birthright, this still doesn't have to go to war. And it's just the men are just like, okay, let's kill everybody, let's murder this entire family, and the women are like, why? No, like Rhaenyra says it, if we can take the throne without killing Otto and everyone, won't you do it? Why not? Well, isn't it worth exploring, peaceful resolutions rather than just immediately trying to kill each other? But honestly, after the way this episode ended, I think peace is out of the window.
That was a cool indictment, like her asking that question. If you could do this without killing anybody, would you?
Yeah,
I think she was trying to point out, like, bro, if
it does.
winning the war is your goal, like, should we focus on winning the war? Like, why are you trying
Yeah,
to fight where we might not need to fight?
yeah,
And them looking at each other from across the table before she says clear the room,
yeah,
you can see these, like, you can see a charged interaction is coming. I mean, there are lots of scenes in this show of Damon looking at people
yeah,
and basically sizing them up.
yeah,
And I guess this, yeah, sure, this is the final one we get for the season, but I think it's very potent in that it brings, you know, their relationship into question. There are a lot of insightful moments that we get in this season, actually, like in the entire season, from Damon and Rhaenyra just having conversations. The first big one was, well, in the first episode. Then we have another one when he comes back from the Narrow Sea, and it keeps going on like that. And I thought this was an interesting one, and one of my favorite parts of it actually was when she talks about the prophecy, and she just mentions it like she's supposed to know. And in my mind, I was laughing because I have never once assumed that Damon knew this prophecy.
Yeah,
In fact, I specifically believed that he was never told,
yeah,
because why on earth would Viserys tell him?
yeah. Well,
So
that's sad because that just means Viserys never saw him as his heir. He was
yeah, he
always
was
like,
never
yeah,
sure. I mean, why would he see him as his heir before his own child?
yeah. I mean, oh, exactly. So that I think was just a moment of sadness for. I mean, obviously, I understand why he did that, but like, I can understand Daemon now feeling an extra layer of betrayal. That damn, that means I really was
I
never the heir.
suppose,
Like, not
but
even like in your mind,
like he put his hands on my queen's neck, and I'm not okay with that. Okay, like
But
I know you might, I know, bro, I know you want to fight, but this is not the person you're fighting with. This is the person you're
yeah,
fighting for.
yeah,
Calm down, get your head out of your ass, and let's understand what's really going on here. Because
yeah,
like what is it with that strangling? Is this you lashing out because you realize that there was a prophecy that you were never told? Like why are
yeah.
you taking that out on her? Why?
On
Because you can't
her,
take it out on your dead brother.
yeah.
This
I
this
mean,
this is bad behavior. Don't do this.
I know a lot of people who then they won't mind getting choked up by Damon. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, go on
um,
Twitter, and you won't have to work hard to find them.
but I mean, there's always been a sense of violence with these people. Like I mean,
Fire and blood,
there was a scene right in the throne room when he was like, "You were a plague sent to destroy me." When Viserys takes Daemon to the
my
flag, he
favorite.
brings out a knife to his neck. It's like he's never gonna kill him, but like
It's
he's
like,
just
yo,
like
is this
I
how you guys
could.
argue all the time?
I think that is honestly like how they argue, man. Like Viserys trying to stab Daemon in the neck, Daemon choking our Rhaenyra. Like, jeez, it's people are violent. But yeah, it's just so much about like the men wanting to go to war and the women wanting to urge restraint and try and find a peaceful resolution. I think that someone like Otto Hightower views that restraint as a weakness. And I think it was, I probably should have mentioned it last episode because when he was gaslighting Rhaenyra, being like, oh, you look like your mother. And I'm like, bro, she's actually a player in the game and you should treat her as that and not
Wait,
just like
what you
make
mean,
this like
Alicent? Like when we was
Alicent,
talking to
sorry.
Alicent?
When I was
Okay,
talking to Alicent, yeah, yeah. And I think the character like Otto views that restraint as a weakness, but it's not a weakness. It's like it's a move that doesn't have to result in mindless violence. And as always, the men again at the end of the episode just fuck things up by Aegon. Well, I mean, we'll talk about that later. But Aemon One Eye being like trying to bully this kid and not thinking that these dragons are wild animals, man. Viserys said it in episode one, like we think that we control these beasts, but we don't.
yeah,
And
that's something
yeah,
I've been thinking about a lot in this
me
episode. I
too.
know we usually wait till later to talk about best lines, and I will kind of save my best line for the episode for later. But I will say that my favorite line from the whole season, a really top contender for it is, and I've been thinking for some reason, I don't know why, I've been thinking about this all week. The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion,
Yeah,
and that's such like if we think
foreshadowing.
like we think about it as just a line, right? It's an interesting and insightful one. But then if we think about it in the context of everything we just saw in this episode, like that's such excellent foreshadowing,
Yeah, it is.
because you have two guys who didn't watch the movie How to Train Your Dragon, and they're essentially lost in trying to make sure these mythical beings actually listen to them. I mean, there's some criticism there, I suppose, in the sense that Game of Thrones, especially in seasons 7 and 8, really stretched our suspension of disbelief in terms of how sentient and intelligent we're supposed to believe these dragons are. Like, one moment they're supposed to be feral, and another moment they're supposed to be wiser than humans. Like the show couldn't,
Metaphorically burning down the Iron Throne.
yeah,
I'm like,
like
oh, fuck off.
yeah, like just make they weren't really making up their minds with that. And
Yeah,
I think this show has done a good job of fixing all that. I think there's a good balance, um, and I think that exists even in this moment where they're not really listening to their writers. Vigar especially, because Vigar is way older than any of these people.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like that was a bit of an excessive response. I don't like the bullying here. I don't like any of it. And
yeah.
despite that, Arax. was trying to escape, then decided, you know what, I'm not going to
Okay.
escape, just escape
Yeah.
like that. I'm going to try burning. And then
Yeah.
when Arax came back and burned, I was like, Luke, what are you doing? But then I heard Luke screaming. He's like, Arax,
No.
what the hell?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, you're not in control of this situation. But for the crazy and sad thing is that like there's a negligent amount of fire, and Vigor is just like, all right, bet.
I bet.
He said bet,
That's
and then
literally what I said.
she literally just finds like, these people finally managed to escape. I, I don't know, like I've watched that scene maybe like 5 times now,
Same.
and I can't, like, in all my calculations, bro, like they never stood a chance.
No,
Like
they didn't.
I'm looking at it, there's no way. Like the only potential chance they had would have been if at the point they got above the clouds,
They just ran.
they had kept flying.
Yeah.
But instead of stopping to look around, like maybe
Yeah.
he should have been looking around while they were still moving instead of being stationary, because
Yeah.
he was looking around, he looked away, and then he gets chomped.
Yeah.
And it's so brutal because in the book, Vhagar, obviously Arax is a smaller dragon, and it's said to be actually quite small. I think the size of Arax in this episode is portrayed very well, very accurately. In fact, that whole scene from the point that just that Luke gets to Storm's End is like word for word accuracy from the book. They really wanted it to feel like it felt in there, and I think that was a nice job. But Arax's size, we weren't entirely sure how different it was in terms of Vhagar, because obviously Vhagar is the biggest dragon alive right now. We didn't know how big, and now we know, thanks to the show, we can. It's not just something in our imaginations; we can actually see it. So that whole, like, that shot from below where Axe is flying and then you can see
Yeah.
Vhagar, that
The
was
shadow. That was
menacing.
beautiful.
That kind of like a horror movie type of approach to it.
Yeah.
That was good use of sort of camera angles, and it's so amazing because like that whole thing is CG. Like these guys are really pushing it with the CGI,
Yeah.
and it was nice to see. But I mean, in what happens in that original like telling in the book is that Vhagar bites Arax's head off like at the neck, and then the two pieces fall to the ground, right? Well, to the into fall into the sea, and then Lucerys obviously is still alive on Arax's back, falling to his death in the water, and then
Yeah.
later all the pieces and Lucerys wash up on like the shores of Storm's End, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but in this episode, these people get chopped.
Yeah.
Like
Literally.
like Vega shows up, bites right in the middle, like one bite,
Just one
kind of
bite.
just like chomps down maybe like once or twice, and this dragon is in pieces,
Yeah.
actual pieces. Like I was, the people I was watching it with, like one of them looked at me after like a few moments. I was like, "Wait, is he dead?" I'm like, "I know you don't think Lucerys survived this. Like I know for a fact that there is no way. Like even if he wasn't just like stabbed by giant knives in the form of dragon teeth, he's falling into the sea from
Yeah.
like above the clouds. Like
That's
nobody
GG.
is surviving that. There's
That's
no blood of the dragon that is saving you.
no. That's
Like
GG's. Like
it was
Vhagar,
wild how that happened.
he was the size of Arx was the size of Vhagar's mouth. Like literally, I think he could have swallowed him in one piece. Like
If
just
yeah,
like no
literally,
bite.
she could have just like ended it right then and there. Like one of the pieces is even still there. Like she's not listening to Amon at all. He's
Yeah.
there like no Vega serve me. And it's like you guys have all failed. Like
Yeah.
you should have listened to Dragon Keepers. Who, I mean, Dragon Keepers, they continue to impress me. Okay, like when Damon's like, okay, conscript the Dragon Keepers, they're formidable fighters. I'm like, wow, and that
They could
actually
do it
makes
all.
sense because they're not just supposed to like tend to the dragons; they're supposed to protect them from anybody who would try to do anything stupid.
Yeah.
So of course they can fight. That makes sense,
Yeah.
and I feel like these guys didn't learn a lot from them. I mean, it was nice because Arax was so nimble, a smaller, younger dragon. Of course, it makes sense that he'd be able to move as fast, especially since Vhagar, being so old, is kind of slow, even though she's
Yeah.
powerful. That's kind of like the trade off
Yeah.
there. And if they weren't in the storm, Arax probably would have
He
escaped
would have escaped.
just because of
His
speed.
speed, yeah.
Even if Aemon wanted to give chase, by the time they got to Dragonstone, like he wouldn't have been able to actually land there and follow. Like he would have been seriously outnumbered. It wouldn't have made any
Yeah.
sense, and even Vhagar would have known that.
Yeah.
But just because of that storm, like there was just
It changed
there was really
everything.
no way, and it's sad. It's really really sad.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really gets me about that is the fact that Rhaenyra like you said, she had been talking to Luke throughout the episode. We'd been seeing his reactions to different things, and we saw how much conflict he was having internally about potentially becoming the Lord of Driftmark. He said it should have gone to Daemon. He calls his mother perfect, and she's definitely not, as we know. But like you said, the fact that that he thinks she is says a lot. So I think Rhaenyra sends him to Storm's End because it's the shortest flights. Like, it's
He's the
really,
safest
really short.
one.
This is literally like an hour or less flight there, an hour or less flight back under normal circumstances. And just like Jaceres literally has to go to both the Vale and the North. Like, he has to go to Winterfell, literally. So he should have been back before anything. And you can see this really is just the effect of a storm. Like, it seems like it's nighttime, but it's not, because as you can see, once they get above the clouds, there's light.
Yeah,
Right? All this happened in the span of like an hour or so, like an hour, 2 hours. And it's just
yeah,
sad because she wanted to protect him by sending him close, but she inevitably sends him to his death. And she carries that with her basically for the rest of her days, because she was trying to protect this guy and give him time to come to terms with who he is and what his destiny could be.
yeah,
And, you know, it's cut short by her brother, and she feels complicit in that because she ended up making it happen. But speaking of complicity and culpability, Amond,
yeah.
Amond.
His sapphire eye first of all was badass. He should be thankful. He looks badass with that eye.
Yeah.
But
Um.
he should not have tried to bully that kid. Like the one of the only differences in that how that scene played out in Ormond's Baratheon's hall was that in the books when he's leaving basically one of Ormond's daughters like goads him to be like, yo, are you really gonna let this kid cut off your eye and just leave for free? And he's like, all right, bet. And that's
Yeah.
how he
What is
starts
what is
off
it
his
with
rebellion.
Baratheons and just like not thinking things
I
through?
don't know, man. I don't know. They yeah. I mean, even the Orma, he can't read. I love the fact that they
The
they
fact that he
they
couldn't read,
yeah.
hilarious. I was like, wait, is he just like lazy? But
No,
like
it's
the
from the
maester
books.
comes up,
He
like
couldn't
that.
read.
That is why he actually can read.
Yeah,
And I remember that as like Boris Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, illiterate. Like,
yeah.
that's wild.
It's a whole thing in the rest of Westeros how like most of the people there can't read because it's based in many ways off a period of history where education was basically locked, or the ability to gain an access to education was locked. And the Baratheons obviously could learn to read if he wanted to, but that just shows you that this is a proud man who's just like, I don't need to read, I can swing a sword. Yes, hashtag
How
toxic
stupid do you
toxic
need to be to
masks.
say something like that?
Yeah,
I mean,
he's,
I don't know. There's you can actually like watching that scene. Another thing I saw was just the point where Aemond realizes he's really messed up,
yeah.
right?
He's like, no, Vega, listen to me, go
I
back.
think in the book it comes off that he was really trying to
Trying
kill
to
this
kill
kid,
him. Yeah,
and that makes sense that it would come off that way in the book because the book is written by historians who weren't there.
yeah,
So the insight we're now taking from the show is that he was really just trying to do a stupid bullying thing.
yeah,
Maybe he wanted to hurt him a little bit, but he didn't want to kill him because that
yeah,
would really start the war.
yeah.
And now he's killed him and is like, okay, now what?
The
This
look on his
because
face. Oof.
yeah, I mean, if you watch the new title sequence, we actually wanted to talk about it last week, but we decided not to because certain things were going to be revealed, or rather, I mean, they were revealed obviously already because it was there, but we didn't want to talk about it too much. And one of the main reasons was Aemon's eye, because he put a sapphire to replace the eye he lost. And in that
Yeah,
title sequence, if you go watch that, the symbol for Aemon actually is that sapphire.
yeah.
But we couldn't mention it last episode because we knew that he would be revealing it himself today,
Hmm.
or rather like this weekend. So we kind of just wanted to let that go. And that was nice and all. I think it was done very well. But just honestly, man, the way he's like, you were just supposed to secure a marriage pact and get and like
And
some
how I
fealty,
and then leave.
right?
Yeah,
And you come back and you've killed this person's child. Like, this
yeah.
wasn't what you were supposed to do. Like, this is somebody who's always trying to fight, and now he's been given a fight.
Fight, and then
You,
all of a sudden he's like,
and then all of
fuck.
a sudden he's like, you can. This is such a face of sobriety.
Yeah.
It's like he just woke up and he's like, oh damn, like
Yeah.
I, I, I can only imagine what happens when he gets back and he tells Alicent. So what happened was like I ended I ended up killing the guy. Like this guy showed up. I didn't expect him, but like I was just messing with him a little bit. But then like I couldn't control Vigor, and now he's dead. And Rhaenyra might be coming for us a lot quicker than we thought.
Yeah,
Like, what do you even do with someone like that? This is
yeah.
somebody who was saying he should be king. I beg.
I mean, yeah, it's so this whole period of episode 9 and 10 is what's called in the books the War of the Letters, where both sides are just writing letters, vying support, seeing who's going to support them, who's going to be against them. But all that ends when Lucerys dies, and then the Dance of the Dragon starts. Because if you see the final scene, that look on Rhaenyra's face, we're talking like that is not the Rhaenyra we've seen this whole time. This is a different character. It might as well be a new time skip because she is pissed off. She feels like she just sent her son off to death, and like it sets the tone for how this conflict is going to evolve. Because I mean, it was obvious that this show was never going to end with peace. It was a lot of it was just figuring out who's going to fight who, and now we know who's going to fight who. We know it's the blacks versus the greens, and the greens have struck their first blow intentionally or not because of Aemon One Eye, Aemon Kingslayer, Aemon anything you want to call him now.
Yeah, the
And
year 120 AC, the year of the Red Spring,
yep.
when everything started going wrong.
Yeah, shit is getting real. But something that it's we followed we didn't even we first saw this character loose in episode 6, and then there was a time skip to like episode what episode going to episode 8. So we saw two characters in we've seen him basically over like 3-4 episodes. And this is one of the problems I've had with this season because I love the time skips and I understand why they were there, and I love getting to see the characters grow up. I love beating the kids, but there was something about the loss of Lucerys that did not feel as intimate as the loss of a character like Viserys, just because we haven't followed him as much, and which is one
Mhm.
of the few cons that I can say over the
It
entirety
feels
of the
more like a
show.
tragedy than a loss, I
Yeah,
suppose.
it's just like, oh, this happened. Damn, I'm sorry for Rhaenyra, but I don't actually feel sorry. I mean, I do, but I don't feel that personal sorriness for Lucerys in the same way that I did when Viserys died. Because with Viserys, we followed him for eight episodes. We've seen him at his strongest. We've seen him slowly deteriorate. We've seen him contemplate his love for his wife who died. We've seen him his dreams, his wishes for ambitions. We've seen him his mistakes, him learning from his mistakes, him trying to just resolve everything on his deathbed, and with Luce, we've seen him, but we haven't. Also, there's been like two different characters, sorry, actors playing the character. So there was just a bit of his death is impactful to the story, but it didn't feel as impactful to me as someone watching the show as someone like when the series died. And
Mm,
yeah, do you
I get you on that. I do feel a bit of a connection to the character, but I can understand how like that's nothing compared to what would have felt for Viserys, who in a lot of ways I will actually probably just go out on a limb and say is the emotional heart of this season.
yeah.
Um, Paddy Considine was seriously kind of carrying some of these episodes on his
He
actual
was,
back.
and you can see his presence is missing the last 2 episodes, which is one of the reasons why they didn't slap as much as the previous episodes.
Yeah, so I guess final verdict is Aemond culpable, or are we just gonna blame this on Vigor?
Amen. It's Amon's fault. Vegard is like it's like when my dog, if I don't like pisses on shits and like, why am I taking him to a public place when I didn't take him for a walk? Why are you taking this beast that has been
Yeah,
in numerous wars and using him to like play around? I think he's gonna listen to me. No, he's
yeah,
a dragon. And like you said earlier, the idea that the Targaryens control the dragons is an illusion. And and Aemon One Eye believed that he had control over Vhagar just because
yeah.
Vhagar likes him a little bit. No,
Do you think the dragons maybe like if we're going with the idea that the dragons are somewhat sentient?
yeah.
Do you think they kind of want a war? Do they want conflict?
No, no. I mean, these dragons
Are they
are
bored?
no. I mean, but okay. So I'm Vhagar, right? And obviously, if as a dragon, I want to see things different. They have a different like instinct, and I evolve differently. Blah blah blah. But I'm just chilling, and then this guy who I kind of like and let hop my back and fly me, and I fly him from place to place occasionally. It just says he hops on me and basically urges me to chase down this smaller dragon who I've met a few times. So I'm just following him, and then this dragon, my rider is trying to be aggressive. I'm like, okay, I'll go along with him. Maybe you want to kill him. Maybe he's your enemy. And then this dragon thing comes to burn me. Like, what the hell? Like, Get out of here.
What
You
the
know,
hell?
yeah, exactly. Like Vhagar, the dragon, I don't think did anything wrong. Maybe Arak shouldn't have attacked Vhagar, but at the same time, I have two dogs and they're very small, and they're always barking at bigger dogs like they could do something. Like why? I don't know why. They'll rip them off. They're tiny, and that's literally what
Oh
happened
my
this
god.
episode. I don't think Vhagar did anything wrong. I don't know why Arak attacked Vhagar. Maybe he felt threatened by Vhagar, but the only reason why he
Hmm.
was threatened by Vhagar is because Aemon was pushing Vhagar to be a threat. It was stalking him, man. It was crazy. And
Yeah.
I guess Arax went into defensive mode, fight or flight mode, and he chose to fight instead of flight, and that cost him and Lucerys their lives, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate.
While we're on the topic of dragons, actually, Damon does mention that they have the advantage.
Yeah.
Um, it's sort of like power versus perceived might, in a sense, because the greens have they have legitimacy in the eyes of the people. They have the upper hand there, whereas the blacks have, I guess, the strength that comes from the number of dragons that they have and the Valarian fleet. And Damon says that it's like 13 to 3 in terms of dragons.
Yeah.
So I guess thinking about that a little bit, um, by my counts, the three dragons would be like on the green side would be Aegon's Sunfire, Helena's Dreamfire, and Aemon's Vhagar, right?
Hmm.
And then on the black side, we have Caraxes, written by Daemon. We have Cyrax, written by Rhaenyra. There's Vermax, Arax, RIP, and Taraxes, written by Jace, Luke, and Joff. Rhaenyra's sons by Harwood. I mean, Laenor Velaryon.
Yeah.
And we also have Sea Smoke, who's still on Driftmark chilling since Laenor is no longer around.
Hmm.
And we have some wild dragons as well, like dragons that aren't claimed, aren't domesticated, like basically like the stray dog equivalents. I know it's kind of a new concept to a lot of people, but that it really is a thing. There are dragons that are kind of just around, and you don't want to go near them because they
Yeah.
don't know you, and that's dangerous. Um, there's also Vermithor and Silverwing, who are still alive. And we see Vermithor briefly in the episode when
Yeah.
Daemon is singing that old Valyrian
That
song
was
and he's
beautiful.
carrying that. Yeah, that was pretty nicely done. And yeah, that dragon that he's trying to, lure out of the darkness to come say hi, like say, good evening, sir. Can I get your help? That is Vermithor, who was actually ridden by Jaehaerys, the old king that we've heard so much about, and Silverwing was the dragon ridden by his wife. So these
Yeah.
are old dragons, very big, very powerful, formidable. So, I think they're setting up some stuff for the beginning of season two where, some people might be getting some dragons.
Yeah.
Maybe Reina will finally get one. I know that was like a point of contention for her in her childhood. And that's one of the things that started this whole thing, but um, maybe there'll be more people who show up to ride these dragons. And actually, even thinking about Reyna, you know, let me put it this way: Luke's death right now, in my mind, is the cause for the bulk of this conflict. Right? This is what I'll call the point of no return. Right? But the thing is, we can say if that hadn't happened, they wouldn't have gone to war. But this is something that can be said of so many things in this
Yeah.
series. Right? Um, Stuff like, if Amon's eye hadn't been cut out, if Reyna had been the one to claim Vigor, which is
Mhm.
what they wanted from the beginning, but she didn't do it, right? If Reyna had eggs that were hatched, if Lena didn't die, if Lena had been married to Viserys, if Viserys had married literally anyone else, quite literally anyone else other than his daughter's best friend,
Yeah.
right? You know, I think one interesting question is which one of these potential things, and even some that I haven't mentioned, and if you're listening to this and you have any in mind, please let us know. Like which one of these really deserves it the most? Again, in my
Yeah.
mind, it's Luke's death, or rather, Amon's murder of Luke, that deserves that phrase of like, if this didn't happen, we wouldn't have gone to war the
Yeah.
most. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Are there any others?
I mean, the Luke's death is, you're right, is the point of no return. Because you can't undo that. by anything. You can't talk it out. You can't make a deal. He's dead, and now you have to deal with it. But I think the Kickstarter will always be the first one, which is Viserys marrying Alicent. Um,
But who do
Everything
we blame
else,
for that? Do we blame
I
Viserys?
blame
Do we blame
Viserys.
Otto?
No,
I blame Otto.
Otto played his cards. Like if okay, if I was Otto and I wanted like my son to be my grandson to be on the Iron Throne, then that's what I would do. It's Viserys who made Otto cannot make Viserys do anything because Viserys is the king. I mean, Viserys
Hmm.
fired Otto at some point. You know, it
Yeah,
was Viserys' decision, and yeah, he divided his family and he gave power to people who are now challenging his legitimate heir and have killed one of his grandchildren. You know, I mean, his son has killed his grandson now. It's a kinslayer. It's but everything in the
yeah.
middle
And
that
that's his
happened,
second nickname, by the way. He's
yeah,
Aemon One
kinslayer,
Eye, and then he's also Kinslayer, and this is
because he
the
killed.
reason.
Yeah, but everything that happened in the middle, like I say it all the time, like even if it didn't happen, it wouldn't have changed anything. You know, when Viserys died, and Alicent is like, Viserys told me on his deathbed that Aegon should be king after him, and then everyone is all like, oh yeah, had already been planning that. That just shows you that that was always going to happen.
No
Otto was always
respect.
going to plan that, and the stuff in the middle adds flavor and tragedy to the conflict, but that ultimately was always going to happen. I mean, Rhaenyra, when she found out Viserys died, like it triggering her miscarriage. This is what, the fifth. I've lost track of how many, like, you know, scenes of childbirth we've seen, but this was one of the ones.
This
The
is
first
maybe the
one,
one that takes the cake.
no, for me,
Yeah.
the first one was still the
Well,
most
Emma.
daunting one.
Okay, yeah,
Emma's one
true. That was
was the
very
daunting
gory.
because they literally cut that child out of her. But I feel a
Uh,
lot more compassion for Rhaenyra because she's just a character who I love. Probably my second favorite character in this third favorite. She's one of my favorite characters in this time period. And just seeing her go through that just after hearing that her brother stole her throne and then the baby dies. It's, I mean, the books, the baby was like a monster with like wings and scales, but maybe that the baby actually wasn't all that, and that was just like stuff that people just wrote up because they want to be chaotic. But yeah, that another pregnancy, another childbirth, another miscarriage. Well, not another
yeah,
miscarriage, but this one was like
just when
a
you think
miscarriage.
Rhaenyra has escaped the
Yeah,
curse of bad
because
pregnancies
she's had five.
that's plaguing the show, she's had
She's had
five
five kids, man.
successful, all of them
Yeah,
boys too, which is
yeah.
like
In Westeros, that's a big thing.
I don't know, like I guess it's just like an interesting question to ask, like the whole like where's the point of no return thing, because on some level, as crazy as it is to say, there might still be slight hope for Alicent and Rhaenyra in terms of their
Mm,
personal relationship, but
mm,
most of what's going to happen now is out of their hands.
yeah,
So like this is the point of no return for the
yeah,
war, and another reason it's worth asking is because going into season two, these characters are asking the same question. Like they're asking, okay, who do we blame here?
yeah.
Like where do we start? Where do we direct our vengeance? Like there's just so much to deal with, and it makes you wonder, like why didn't the blacks prepare for this better? I was talking before,
Mm,
like in I think in one of the our previous conversations about how she knows Viserys is dying. Like everybody knows this guy's time is limited, and
yeah.
they spent 6 years away from King's Landing, and then they came back and immediately left. There's no way I would have left that place. There's zero. Like there's no way. Like okay, dinner didn't go well. It's like okay, we should return to Dragonstone. What?
Man, honestly, if like they had stayed there, I think they would have been killed. I think that exactly how the Brainies got locked up in the room is like who found out that Viserys died first? It was all those people. So it's possible that Odo would have still found out first and then just sent
And
guards to
killed
kill
them. You really think
in their rooms when they
it
were
would not have been, it
sleeping.
would not have been that easy. Like they would
Why?
have been armed.
In their rooms when they're sleeping, if you bring 10 guards, like, even if Daemon has like a Valerian steel sword, it's GG's. It's
I
like
mean, yeah, I know,
if they
but
wanted to
still,
kill Rhaenys in that room right there and then, she was dead, right?
yeah, true. But the thing is, I feel like I feel like there would have been some type of way for someone on the black side to also find out in a similar time
Mm.
frame. Because
Well,
I feel like
maybe,
Damon would have had maybe at least one informant.
yeah. So I
But
guess
anyway,
that
I'm
it
grasping
comes
at
down to
straws here,
bouncing
I
off
guess.
information, yeah. Because I'm just like, if Odo knows first, they're all dead. If and that's like a gamble, If Odo knows first, they're all dead because we've seen that he's willing to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you
But
mentioned Rainey's because she's doing a lot in this episode.
yeah,
Yeah, without
she,
doing much. All those looks that she's giving people from the background, I
yeah,
was
they were
loving it
huge.
so
Yeah,
much.
I know, and I love how Corley's
Yeah,
admitted to her that she was right, and he was like, "I'm
yeah.
done with all of this." That was
And then,
beautiful.
ironically enough, she turns around and she's like, she basically says, "Yeah, I was right, but now we have to fight anyway because these aren't my grandsons, but you said they are grandsons, so I guess I'm gonna have to accept them.
Yeah,
And if Aegon is on the throne, these boys are gonna die. So
yeah,
we have to. Our side has been chosen for us,
yeah,
and we have to fight. So it's cool that she manages to actually convince him. It's like, oh, things aren't going well for me, blah blah blah. So he's like, I'm going to fight. It's like I didn't have any place here. When he said that in the episode, I was like, are you stupid? You're not the only person at stake here. You're supposed to be
yeah,
leading this people. You just left them. Anyway, it's good that she convinces him. I remember she's like this like badass grandma. Like both shows, Game of Thrones and House of Dragons, seem to have just this wise, cool maternal figure with
yeah.
like the quick wit and everything.
Olena, right?
Olenna Tyrell was
Yeah,
there, and now we have her, and she just has an interesting journey. Like
yeah,
she clearly supports Rhaenyra throughout the episode, but she doesn't bow until she's completely sure that that's what she wants to do, what she wants
yeah,
to declare. Like she's essentially like, let's see how you do first. Like, how are you going to handle these initial moments?
yeah. And
I
she won.
remember when
Rhaenyra won her over. Yeah.
I remember when like Daemon, because in my own Dragon count, I didn't mention Millie's, and that's out of respect for Rennie's, because like when Daemon was doing his own, he's like, oh, we have
Millies, and
Caraxes,
she
we
was like,
have Xerax, we have
"What?
Millie's, and she was like, huh? You have
Huh?
who?
You have who?"
Nah, that was crazy.
It
But
was.
actually, I mentioned that I get to people being mean to writers, and I just need to say like I don't want to get too mad, especially since I know the people who listen to us have sense, they have class. Okay. But there are other people on the internet that need to lay off Sarah Hess. Okay. Lay off Sarah Hess. People are saying that she's the second coming of Benioff and Weiss. What on earth would you be saying such nonsense if it was a man who was writing? Like, this is so stupid.
Sarah has directed the last episode, by the way. If,
Yeah, Sarah Hess. She I think she was one of the writers on the previous episode,
mm,
right? So the idea for Rainey's coming out from the ground was hers, right?
hmm
And people are essentially saying that that was so unnecessary and that it creates some contradictions for some things that are going to happen later in this series that Fami and I cannot tell you about. But let's just say that some people are kind of mad and they're assuming that the writers haven't considered everything. Okay, you know that this stuff is going to happen. Great for you. Do you genuinely think the writers also don't know? What's
yeah,
wrong with you?
literally.
Please stop, don't make me angry. I beg. I don't actually don't have energy. So please, like, lay off Sarah Hess. Like, we don't really need to get into this whole situation of like, let's blame the writers for every small thing that doesn't happen exactly the way it is in your head. You're not
Yeah,
that smart. Okay.
yeah. And if you were, you'd be a writer. So
Yeah,
shut
just
the
like
fuck up.
you haven't written a screenplay before. Just
Yeah.
please keep quiet. I'm trying my best not to swear at you, but you're making me very angry. Stop it.
I will
So
swear at them. I got you.
so yeah, like even the details of Rhaenys' armor, they were mad cool, honestly. Just attention to detail in this episode is fantastic as
Yeah,
always. Production value on point.
yeah.
I mean, first of all, I was wondering last episode when she was able to put that armor on. Like, was it just inside? Does she have like a glove box on the dragon where she can take out such things? I don't know, because she barely even like Rhaenyra had barely enough time to process the news before she starts going into violent labor.
Yeah,
And
and I think that that was the news kind of pushed her to have a premature labor, unfortunately, which is crazy. Also, something else we haven't, I don't think we've talked about this, but Rainey's, her mom was a Baratheon, like, just to add an
yeah,
extra layer of tragedy. Like, the
yeah, her
people who
mom was a
killed,
Baratheon.
Lucerys, who is like technically her grandson, Michael Jackson kids, but the people who killed that were her cousins. Like, that's someone who she's related to, and
Well,
it's
to
just
be
like,
fair, the Baratheons had nothing to do with that. They probably could have kept Aemond inside, but Aemond, that's all Aemond. Boris even says, "Not in my house."
yeah,
Like,
but I feel like, again, there's like action and there's inaction and there's action through inaction. I think that that was an action through inaction by
hmm,
Boris because he knew what the fuck. Aemon is just like, I'm gonna kill you, and he Boris like, not on my house. Take Lucerys out of here. And Aemon's just like, okay, bye. What's he gonna do? He's gonna go try to fuck with him.
uh, yeah, I guess. I mean, I guess it goes back to one of the reasons, and that's another reason people are mad at the writers, the fact that she didn't burn them.
Mm,
But that's kind of annoying, to be honest, because the people who are complaining about the dragon coming out contradicting a certain thing that we can't discuss, like wanting Rhaenys to burn those people is literally going to achieve the same thing that you're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
So maybe pick a side, but in any case, in that moment, Rhaenys was finally able to actually be the
Yeah.
most powerful woman in the realm,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
something that they skipped over and didn't give her.
Yeah.
Um, and Ramin's score in that moment was
Beautiful.
insane. Like
Beautiful.
that was a well choreographed, a well scored, a well
Yeah.
blocked moment. And
Also,
yeah,
I wanted to point out that like Rhaenyra was not pissed off at Rhaenys for that decision because she understood. It was only
yeah,
Daemon that was pissed off.
yeah,
I,
because Daemon is unhinged and
yeah.
Aemond is clearly more unhinged than he
Yeah.
is.
I, there's a
But I
theme of
like
the
how,
men wanting violence, and I guess I'm a
yeah.
man too because I wanted her to burn them then and then. I'm like
To
burn
be
them
fair,
right
I
away.
do I didn't want her to do that, not just
Uh,
because it wasn't her war to start, but because it would it just in the eyes of the people, like just in world, we've given this guy a whole lot of legitimacy. We've given him the crown of Aegon the Conqueror.
yeah.
We've given him the sword of Aegon the Conqueror, which was wielded by Viserys. We've anointed him according to the faith of the Seven with oil, and we've done it in the dragon pit, surrounded by the masses. Like
Mhm.
burning all those people right then and there, and then Rhaenyra coming to say, "Yeah, like this is your actual queen." That would have left a really bad taste. Like they would have
Yeah.
just, she
It
would have
was.
gone down as somebody who murdered her brother, who everybody believed was the actual heir or the rightful heir, so to speak. Just to take the crown for herself, she would have just gone down as another scorned woman, and I feel like it just wouldn't have been as good for their side as people
Yeah.
think. Um, the symbolism there is interesting. Like Otto says that every symbol of legitimacy belongs to him, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, for now, you know. But there are some things to note because that crown he's wearing, yes, it's Aegon the Conqueror's crown, but it's also the crown of Maegor the
You got
Cruel,
the
because
cruel.
Maegor
Yeah.
wore that crown too.
Yeah.
And back then, when Jaehaerys took over, he had that crown put away because they wanted to kind of shed the effect that Maegor had had on the realm. And the crown that Jaehaerys wore for his long reign was that really nice golden one that we've been seeing throughout the
Yeah.
series, because that's the same crown that Viserys
Viserys
wears.
wears, and that's what
So
Rhaenyra is wearing.
yeah, so there's an interesting sense of symbolism in there, in that, you know, Aegon, um, Alicent's son, is wearing the crown of Aegon the Conqueror and Maegor the Cruel, and Rhaenyra is wearing the crown of Jaehaerys and Viserys. You
Hmm.
know, that already is kind of dropping this ideological divide between these two factions.
Yeah.
It's kind of painting them as somewhat good and evil, but also there's a sense of like power and action versus like, you know, restraint and sort of like subdued might in a way. It's like
Yeah.
who's really right here, you know? And I think that does a good job of sort of demarcating that. Speaking of which, Eric made it in One
Yeah.
Piece, so we thank God for him.
Yeah.
And we thank God for the other Kingsguard who weren't burned alive. Though I don't
Yeah.
know if, like, what else were they supposed to say? You
Well, I
know?
mean, if there, I feel like some Kingsguard would have, there's been a history in Westeros of some
Yeah,
Kingsguard
some would
failing
have
to die.
said it
They would have
because
said
you
it
know
and they would have died
there's
then and
Sworn
there.
Brotherhood, I suppose. I mean, even Eric says like he's like um stand down, brothers. I mean no harm. Like don't
Yeah.
worry. And it's easy to forget that, like, and I said it before in our discussions, the Kingsguard, like the Night's Watch, is a sworn brotherhood. Like the only difference is that, you know, they have much stricter rules and there can only be seven at a time.
Yeah.
But it really is an ancient order, or at least as ancient as the Targaryen dynasty. So
Yeah.
at this point, it's been going on for a little while. There've been a lot of them,
Yeah.
and the fact that he chooses sides here is interesting. In this episode, is one of the rare moments where we see all the Kingsguard together in the same place when they're
Yeah.
on that same bridge where
Yeah.
Otto and Daemon are talking again, like they did in episode two,
Yeah.
which is I now remember is titled "The Rogue Prince," because now he's like Damon is a lot more mature than he was back then. He's not just seeking attention; he's acting with purpose,
Yeah.
right? And we see the Kingsguard on his side, we see the Kingsguard on the other side, and we see that Eric and Arik are on opposing ends. So, you know, hopefully they don't have to fight because that might be sad. But oh
Yeah.
well. Um,
Rhaenyra
I
looks good
thought
in that crown though.
yes, it really suits
It
her.
suited her. I was like, damn.
She looked very regal, way more regal
Yeah,
than Aegon did. Like
yeah.
Aegon looked like they had just like fished him out of a gutter, like put some small lotion on him and said like, okay, go and stand there,
No,
which is
Aegon looked like
basically
his
what
parents
happened.
were related. He looked like his parents were related. It just looked like a squirmy
Yeah,
little fuck.
it was cool, honestly, seeing her like that.
Yeah,
Some really good dialogue and delivery there. I mean, it's worth noting that like yes, Otto is saying things that are true, like everything I mentioned about those like symbols of legitimacy. But I think he's also kind of lying. Like he's like, yeah, the Baratheons, the Arryns, and the Starks are considering this. Like,
yeah,
yeah, they might be, but at the same time, how are we supposed to believe that you've really been able to send letters to them this quickly? Like, you know, our guys are going there on Dragonback, right?
yeah,
Like, there's no way. I think, I mean, sure, it could be true, but on some level, I feel like it's kind of a bluff.
yeah.
And you know, he then just like I felt like even at that point I'm like, okay, you're doing fine, you've done what you came to do, go away. Then he's like, you know, there'll be honorable places for your sons in court by Daemon.
All
You know,
hostages, man. I'm
there'll
like,
be he said there'll be his squire and cupbearer. What? Like when Daemon's like, I feel like I try to like I'm not even gonna lie, like I like TV violence as much as the next guy. You know, like when it's necessary, I think it should be there. But normally I try to kind of keep a little bit of restraints on it. But in this episode, when Damon was like, I would rather feed my sons to my dragon than have them carry shields and cups for your cunt of a grandson. Like that was I was like, you know what? Yeah, bars. I couldn't have said that better myself because what an insult. He said places of honor.
literally hostages.
They're supposed to be heirs to the Iron Throne. You want to make them cupbearer and squire? Are you
Yeah.
dumb?
No,
I
it's
don't know. This series is really shaped by the second sons of the world, isn't it?
mhm.
Otto,
Daddy issues.
Daemon, even Vaemont on some level,
Yeah,
Lucerys. Like being
series.
a second son is just like Larry Strong as well. You know,
Yeah,
like being a second son is just is dangerous business,
yeah.
and it's very pivotal because these are the guys who have ambition because things aren't just handed to
Given to
them,
them.
and
Yeah,
I think that's kind of cool. So actually, speaking of Larry, something I did say last week, you know, Allison has never really known sexual pleasure
yeah.
because, like, Viserys clearly wasn't doing it for her.
Hmm.
But I think that's why she thinks that what Laris has done is fine because she doesn't know how to take control of like sexual situations for herself.
Hmm.
So there's this kind of sexual repression that's rampant in Westeros because he's clearly been doing this. He's been looking at her since she was like 16
Yeah,
or like 17, and he wanted this to happen. And of all the things that could have happened, like this guy he's blackmailed her into believing that like she's complicit in the death of his father and brother. He could
yeah.
ask for anything, and all he's asking for is feet
Feet.
pics. So I don't I don't know exactly like maybe he's not an enigma, maybe he's just dumb. I don't know for the guy again, but
Yeah,
I,
I
she
think
has
part
so
of
much
it
power
might
in
be
that
like
situation that she
power
doesn't
trips.
realize.
Yeah, she.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just because
yeah.
like she could tell him, oh, it's he picks you want. How about I just let you live? You know, like there's so many things that
Because
she
you know
could
she
do.
needs him. She needs him. She needs him. Like I said, I think that he's more of an important ally to her than Otto is. Like that
I
ass.
guess.
Yeah.
I
That's,
don't know. It's kind of like
she
yeah,
needs
she
him and
needs
he
him.
knows
She
it.
needs him, but I just don't like that she needs him. I guess,
Oh, I don't. I wish she needed more people because I hate her ass. But
especially since Allison really isn't in control, right? I know this isn't an episode where Allison appears a lot, so like talking about her is an interesting choice. But I
who is
feel
in
like
control then?
you
No
know
one
because
is in control.
no one is in control on that side. Otto probably is,
Is
but
he?
not really. Not really because like he doesn't have all the info that he thinks he has.
Yeah.
If you look at like contrasting between Rhaenyra and Alicent, you know, Rhaenyra is actually in control of of every conversation she's in, even
Yeah.
when she's on the back foot.
Yeah.
Like even you can see it as an example in episode 8 when she's talking to Rhaenys about betrothing um Jason Luke to Bela and Rhaena, right? She's in control of every conversation, and that includes when she's talking to powerful men.
Yeah.
Even if she doesn't win ideologically the argument or whatever, she's actually in control of what she's saying. She has full
Yeah.
agency over her story. And that's in stark contrast to Alicent's experience, where like Alicent only really knows how to be a pawn. And
Yeah.
that's something we addressed last week. You know,
Yeah.
in
Well.
this situation, she's using her own son as a pawn too. Because like I said, Jaehaerys was putting Maegor away by using that crown, the new crown made of gold that Viserys also used. Even though Viserys was also using Blackfire, the sword, there's something ominous in the idea of Aegon II, a pawn of Alicent, who is a pawn of Otto, using all these symbols. Because like Aegon is like the new Aegon, he doesn't know what he's doing. There's something symbolic in Rhaenyra carrying on the will of Avara by wearing Jaehaerys' crown, but like she has that purpose. She has she has that sense of duty and she wants what's best for the realm. Whereas Aegon kind of just wants to masturbate out the windows and wear blood, right? He's not doing great. Like he doesn't want to be here, and you know, like I asked last week, who is this really serving? It's crazy. Even the King's Guard, they are in shambles as well. They're divided. Um, the King's Guard, I mean, this is probably the beginning of the end for them. Like they've had a whole bunch of like good people, but then from here they start to have like really weird people until they get to the point they are in Game of Thrones, where like you have people like Meryn Trant and
Oh
Boris
god, a
Blunt
waste
and
man.
all those other foolish people that
A waste man.
like Joffrey orders them to beat little girls and they say yes. Howard Westerling would never have done that.
Yeah.
So and now Kristen Cole is here. I mean, we'll see how that plays out in season 2.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So much happened in this
I don't know.
episode. Rhaenyra is so
There's
pissed off.
just a lot.
Rhaenyra's pissed. I felt bad for her, man. And I love the way they ended it. That final scene was, I think, a very good way to end the season. It's like this show is about the dance of the dragon, and
The
we're
person
in the
who
dance of the
turns
dragon.
around after looking at that fire to mourn her son, that's a different human
That's
being,
a different
guys.
person. That's not Rhaenyra.
That is
That's
not
not
the
the
same
Rhaenyra we
person.
know. Might as well do another time skip. It's a different character. It's just so interesting because I remember the scene where they were talking about Daemon was doing the dragon counts. Like after we've seen the end of this war, yeah, there's 11, 13 dragons on one side, five on the other. But like those dragons are not like they're not. Do you control them? Who controls the dragons? The dragons are just beasts that like operate on their own rules and laws, and the Targaryens feel like
The
they have
dragons
an
essentially
understanding of them.
license they license their agency. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, you can have this control for a little while, except in certain situations where I'm going to take control back.
and you have no
They're
idea
wild
when that's gonna
creatures.
come. Yeah, it's just like yeah, I like the dragon. Like I like you, but man, I like me more, and I'm gonna act in my interest. But yeah, it's I'm like Damon singing. That the visuals on that scene where Damon is singing when he puts on the torch, and then you see Vermithor
Vermithor.
stand up. It's reminiscent of like season 8, episode 5 or 6, when six when Danny lands, and then Drogon flies off from behind her. And you see the dragon wings just show up. As it
Hmm.
almost looks like Danny has wings. That's like one of the most
There's even
beautiful.
more. There's even more exact parallel for when Daenerys executes Varys.
Yeah,
Also in season 8, she's standing and she's like calling out the sentence, and she's like, "Sentence you to die," and then Drogon comes out from the
yeah,
darkness
yeah,
behind
yeah.
her.
I see it.
That
That
was
was
interesting.
beautiful.
I would
Yeah,
really. I'm looking forward to seeing what Vermithor
gets up to.
does next, and
Yeah.
who actually ends up riding that dragon. Because like I said, these dragons are up for grabs. I don't know. Maybe there's going to be some kind of like dragon rider audition, but that sounds dangerous to me because if they don't like you, you get burned alive,
Yeah,
right? See, that's even another thing. I was talking about points of no return. What if Vigor hadn't allowed Aemon to claim her? Right? What if she had just burned that kid?
that would have exactly like when you play the what if game. It's just yeah,
There's just some, and I think that's just such a good testament
yeah,
to the writing, because if we can find so many things that's like, well, if this hadn't happened, if this hadn't happened, if this hadn't happened, that's proof of the real sense of um realism in here. Like this is like a believable series of domino effects,
yeah,
and that's nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to think about how much would have been averted if emails existed in Westeros. Just
Oh
send
my
an
god.
email to Boris Baratheon. You with me? Question mark? Question mark?
Well, the thing is, they
Um,
probably could have done that, with the Ravens, but they wanted to be more convincing with
yeah,
dragons.
I
And
understand. It was a good play. It was a good play.
mm,
But speaking of plays, who do you think played the episode?
I am going to say Rhaenyra, just
Hmm.
because the restraint that she showed. made sure that things didn't go as bad as they probably could have.
Yeah,
This could all have been worse, but the only sad thing about that is, well, now they've killed her son,
yeah,
so that restraint is probably out the window too.
yeah,
And God knows what's going to happen at the beginning of season two.
yeah. I think maybe to me, there was no clear one for me this season, but I'm just gonna go with Sir Eric. You know, because he gave Rhaenyra the crown, and
I think you mean
he
Eric.
that exactly sums up how it really feels. I don't know who is who. Sir Eric, uh, Sir Eric, who gave Rhaenyra the crown, as a part of a layover because he helped Rhaenys escape last episode, and then he
Yeah.
still followed through. So I'll give it
People
to
were
him.
actually asking, like, oh, he's probably going to get there before her. I was like, in what world
And they
is he
drag
going
on.
to get there before her? Like,
In fact, I think in the
see
book
how
they
it's
even flew on the dragon together.
that guy came back almost like a whole half a day later. I mean,
Yeah.
speaking, and actually, I should probably also mention that that was a very tough day for Rhaenyra.
Mm.
Like, she wakes up, she's having a moment with her son. Rhaenys shows up with bad news. Then she
Yeah.
goes into labor, loses this child, has to wrap the child herself instead of the silent sisters because that's what she wants. She wants to have some connection. Cremates the child in swaddling clothes back right there, with like candle fire, and then there's also dragons present, and then Eric shows up, and this is her lowest point. Then Eric shows up and like drops the crown, gives it to Daemon. Daemon crowns her. It now becomes like her highest moment. Everybody's bowing, well, except Rainey's, but
And
yeah. Then
then she loses her
it
child, man.
yeah, she loses that child. She goes in and she starts the war efforts. I like how they all seem united in that scene. It's a really
Mm.
nice feeling.
Mm.
Bela and Reyna look at their grandmother and then they go stand next to their betrothed to show that they're with them.
Yeah.
That was very cool. At that moment, I was already feeling bad for Reyna, but
Yeah.
yeah, oh
And then
God,
she lost two
so much
children
pain.
this episode, man. Two
Losing two
children.
kids in one day after your
Yeah.
brother has stolen your
Uh-huh.
birthright.
Yeah.
What is life? Being a woman is hard, bro.
Hard, man. Feel for Rainey's. I really feel for sorry, Rhaenyra. I feel for her. But okay, we've done who you say played this season the best? Because I think we're kind of in that introspective feel where we're looking at the
Oh,
whole season as
jeez.
a whole. Or do you need more time to get an answer?
I think there's several answers, and I probably need time to get into it in depth. But for now, I'm gonna mention somebody who I think is a great contender for that, and that actually is Rainey's,
Rainey's okay.
and that's because she's shown a lot of restraint throughout the season, and has acted now at the time that she feels is best to act.
Yeah,
She was wronged. She was passed over. She was cheated from her own birthright, but she decided to play her role and choose her family.
yeah,
And that worked out interestingly for her, even though her family was still trying to, avenge her loss, especially Corliss, right?
yeah,
But, she held fast in really keeping her priorities in the same way because other women in that we've seen in this world in her position would have done things very differently. Like if Rhaenys was Cersei, there would have been a war long ago because she would have been like, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then when the person started to show restraint, she would have been like, well, this is why you're a coward
yeah,
or some nonsense like that, trying to like attack the ego. Like Cersei was really not it, bro. But anyway, before I even start getting into all the problems I have with Cersei, um, yeah, Rhaenys did better because she ensured that there was no necessary bloodshed. She tried to just focus on raising her children. And even after all of that was taken away from her, like she said, the stranger has visited her several times in her life. Even after all that, she still wants to make sure that she's making measured responses to everything. She chooses her husband's side because she knows that it's better for a family to be united and then change their minds together than for her to go against him in public. Like she has real class. Like she always wants to make sure that they seem united, and they do. This is why people are always kind of looking to them. This is why people want the alliance with the Valarians. This is why they continue to be strong even when they have internal conflicts, because they don't air out their dirty laundry like everyone else is doing, right? And now, um, she was just captured and she managed to escape. She chose not to burn. That was an interesting move, and combining that with her decision to not just support Rhaenyra, but wait until the right moment to show that she was supporting Rhaenyra, you know, all of that combines for me into a really well played season for this character. We see where she started, and we like right from the first scene, she's there at the council, right in Harrenhal, and we see where she's ended now, offering to patrol the stepstones herself with melees, and she's very formidable on that dragon.
Mm,
Just so people know, um, that's really nice. Like she's stayed consistent, and she's also grown to be more accepting of certain things. Because obviously she was annoyed with Rhaenyra, but she's moving through to kind of show that allegiance and make sure that her conflicts are not passed down to her children and grandchildren. Like everybody's doing a bad job of keeping things contained in that regard.
yeah,
But she is not saying that Bela and Rhaena have to hate their cousins, or that they have to, necessarily even hate Alicent's children. She is empowering them to see the world and understand it and make their own decisions. And they look at her, they kind of exchange, they kind of make this little speechless exchange where they're going to go next to their betrothed during that scene, like I said. And it's nice to see that she's fine with them making that decision, even if she's not fine with the decision in the moment, which I think she was, by the way. But yeah, she's not forcing them to believe or think anything. She's just teaching them what the world is. And I think that she's doing the best job of actually like empowering the next generation. So as far as the season goes, I think she's probably the one who's played the best. I don't know if anyone actually comes close. Like I'm trying to think of a close second right now. Like I said, I'll have to go in depth to figure that out, but I don't know if anyone else really comes close.
yeah. I'd say for me it's Daemon. Just to look at where he was when he started off, when he is now. He's defending his
He's
brother's
grown a lot as a
wishes and
person.
legacies. He's defending his family. But I mean, he's king. I mean, technically, because Rhaenyra is queen and he's king consort, but he's king.
His current consort.
And yeah, he's raised badass children, and yeah, I think him.
Okay. I mean, Viserys, I love you, but I want to say you, but it's not you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, but best performance is Paddy for me, and no one even comes close. And they've been beautiful
I think
performances.
Matt Smith is doing a fantastic job as Daemon, though.
He is. No, he is.
Like
He is. He is.
Daemon, he's exactly what I imagined Daemon would be, and that
Yeah,
is saying a lot.
yeah.
Like even if you look at like drawings of Daemon, the way he's described and such, his demeanor, Matt Smith is just
He's doing
like
a good job.
just coalescing everything so
Yeah,
well. Like it's mad.
yeah.
It's
He
it's really
is.
mad.
But for me, it's Paddy. I'm too much in awe by that performance, just because Damon is a badass character. So Matt Smith has a lot to work with. Like Viserys is one of the most. He's probably the second most forgettable king, maybe third.
He's like
And
this guy
yeah,
just like he didn't have any real character traits. He was just a guy who had to make some decisions or not make some decisions, and it led to a whole bunch of things happening. But apparently, Paddy, like I know we've been praising Paddy so much, right? Like you can look in the show notes or some of the previous episodes, and you just see that we've been praising Paddy.
yeah.
But George R. R. Martin is actually so impressed with him that he's like, I may have to go and rewrite some stuff in the book so that like future like publications of this book, like future printings, will just have new information about this character. That's like, yo, he did this, because like Paddy expanded the scope of what Viserys could have been,
Yeah,
and it was amazing. Like I guess
yeah.
I've seen him in other things. I've seen him in Informer. I've seen him in Peaky Blinders. Seen him in
Fine.
like
Yeah.
he's a great actor, and he's also a rock star. Like he performed at Glastonbury with his band this year. Like people don't know that the man plays music. um yeah, he's just an overall cool guy. And I was definitely intrigued when I heard that he'd been cast in the show. I was even more intrigued when I heard that he was playing Viserys, because I was like, oh, why they need somebody this cool to play Viserys? Like Viserys doesn't do anything. Little did I know. Little did I know. Yes, Viserys didn't do anything, but he did do it in style. Yeah, today's show was produced by Bankole Mokwede, Ibuka Namani, and Chinedu Iheji. Extra thanks to Jibs, a regular co-host, and to all of you for listening. This has been an amazing 10 weeks. I can't believe it's literally been 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, we've been your hosts, Ibu and Fami, and this has been Popcorn for Dinner. Um, we might not see you for a while, but um, still come back to Popcorn for Dinner, because we're going to be having a lot of coverage of The White Lotus. We have some other shows coming up too. And don't forget to check out the article written by Bankole on Industry Season 2. We'd love to know what you think. So continue to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Let us know what you are feeling on social media. Hit us up with your own thoughts and theories on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, till next time.